More than 200 House members and over 37 senators are now calling on U.S. President Donald Trump to resign, be removed from office, or face impeachment. Top Republicans joining that list.
Well, I think the best way for our country, Chuck, is for the president to resign and go away as soon as possible.
Even the president's former acting chief of staff and one of his greatest offenders has had enough.
The ideas of the Republican Party are bigger than one man, but I think if you have any role at all in what happened on Wednesday, that you don't deserve to leave the party anymore.
A procession carrying the body of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, killed in the riots, drove by the Capitol Sunday afternoon when the White House finally lowered its flag to half-mast. The flag was lowered at the Capitol Friday. The president remains out of sight, as many lawmakers fear what his loyalists may do next.
The number of death threats that have been thrown out against people like me and, frankly, every member of Congress. I mean, look at Vice President Pence, one of the most faithful guys to Donald Trump, is now public enemy #1 in Trump world.
Welcome, guys. Adam is here. So what just happened right now? A new national poll shows a majority of Americans, including Republicans and MAGA supporters, want Trump to resign immediately. Inside the administration, staff are resigning, phone calls are leaking, and Trump is publicly unraveling as his own base begins to abandon him.
Breaking news, a second GOP senator is now calling on President Trump to resign following Wednesday's deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol. This coming just one day before what could be the start of his second impeachment. Eyewitness News reporter Leticia Juarez live from home with the breaking details. Leticia.
Well, good morning, Rachel and John. That's right. Breaking this morning, we're now hearing from Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who is calling on President Trump to resign, saying it's best for the country. Now, this comes as Twitter has silenced Trump on their platform. He's also been silenced from other platforms after the riots that happened on Wednesday. Now, big tech is also taking some steps to make it harder for the president's supporters to communicate by taking action against the far right-wing platform Parler. Apple has removed the app from its store, saying it's home to violent threats and calls for illegal action. Google also removed Parler from its Play Store, and Amazon booted it from its web hosting service after Parler users celebrated the violence at the Capitol.
Let me start with the resignation that cracked everything open. Joe Kent was not some low-level staffer nobody had ever heard of. He was the counterterrorism chief. His entire job was to evaluate threats to the United States, to look at the intelligence, and to tell the president and the national security team what was real and what was not. And on a day that will go down as the moment the Iran war narrative died, Kent walked away from his position. He resigned.
Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. We wanted to share this breaking news here with you as top counterterrorism official Joe Kent has resigned. We're learning this within the past hour here. Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, announced his resignation today, saying he cannot in good conscience back the Trump administration's war in Iran. Kent shared in a social media post saying Iran, quote, posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby.
And he did not slip out the back door with a polite letter thanking the president for the opportunity. He went public. He told the truth. And that truth was devastating. Kent said directly that the Iran war posed no imminent threat to the United States. He said the conflict never would have happened without pressure from Israeli lobby groups pushing American foreign policy in a direction that served their interests, not ours. He said Donald Trump basically started a war because foreign governments wanted him to. Let that sink in for a moment. The counterterrorism chief, the person who saw all the intelligence, who knew what the real threats were and what they were not, stood up and said the entire justification for the war was a sham, manufactured, false, a lie told to the American people to get them to support a military conflict that should never have happened. This was not some anonymous source leaking to a reporter. This was not an opposition researcher digging up dirt. This was one of Trump's own appointees, someone who worked inside the administration, someone who was supposed to be loyal, publicly blowing the whistle on the President of the United States. And that is when the dam broke. Because once Kent said what he said, once he made it clear that the intelligence did not support the war, every Republican lawmaker who had gone on television to defend Trump's decision suddenly looked either complicit or clueless. Every talking point about imminent threats and national security emergencies collapsed overnight. The entire narrative that Trump had built to justify sending American service members into harm's way was revealed as a house of cards. And the American people noticed. They noticed in a big way. Now let me show you what the polling actually looks like, because the numbers are brutal. 55% of the country is calling for Trump's immediate resignation. That is not a close call. That is not a divided nation split down the middle. That is a clear, unambiguous majority saying that this president needs to leave office right now. To put that in perspective, Richard Nixon resigned when his approval rating dropped into the 20s and when it became clear that even his own party would not protect him. Trump is not there yet on approval, but he is close. And the trajectory is all wrong for him. Every day brings new bad news. Every headline makes things worse. Every time he opens his mouth or posts on social media, he digs the hole deeper. The approval rating itself is sitting at a number that would be considered terminal for almost any other politician. 36%. That is the floor. That is the diehard base that will never leave him no matter what he does. But everyone else? The independents who swung his way in the last election? The moderate Republicans who held their noses and voted for him because they liked his policies? They are gone. They have abandoned ship. And they are not coming back. But here is the thing that really shows how bad this has gotten. It is not just the general public. It is his own party. It is the people who are supposed to have his back no matter what. And they are fracturing in real time, right in front of us. You want to know how fractured? Let me tell you about the leaked phone calls. According to sources tracking Trump's communications, the president has been making private calls to Republican lawmakers and party officials, and what he is saying on those calls is the sound of pure panic. He is telling people, resign or be impeached. He is threatening his own party members. He is demanding loyalty in a way that suggests he knows something terrible is coming, and he needs everyone to fall in line. But the most telling quote, the one that should send chills down the spine of anyone who cares about the stability of the American government, is this. Trump has been heard saying, "I am begging the party to save me. I need them to save me." A sitting president of the United States is begging his own political party to protect him from what is coming. That is not confidence. That is not strength. That is desperation. That is a man who understands that his position is crumbling and who is looking around for anyone who might throw him a rope. And the people he is begging? They are starting to turn away, because the Iran war is not an abstraction. It is not a debate about foreign policy doctrine or strategic interests. It is American service members coming home in flag-draped coffins. 6 so far. 6 families who will never see their sons and daughters again. 6 funerals, 6 Gold Star ceremonies, 6 moments where a military family receives that knock on the door that they have dreaded since the day their loved one enlisted. And for what? For a war that the counterterrorism chief himself says was based on no imminent threat. For a conflict that was manufactured under pressure from foreign lobbyists. For a president who wanted to look tough and ended up getting Americans killed for no good reason. That is the question that is eating away at Trump's support among the very people who should be his strongest backers. Republican voters care about the military. They care about American lives. They care about their sons and daughters who wear the uniform. And when they hear that those lives were sacrificed for a lie, when they understand that the war was not necessary, that the threats were not real, that the whole thing was pushed by foreign interests, something inside them breaks. The polling on this is stark. At the beginning of the Iran conflict, more than 3/4 of Republicans supported Trump's decision to launch strikes. They believed him when he said there was an imminent threat. They trusted that he had the intelligence, that he knew what he was doing, that he would not send American troops into danger without a good reason. That support has been collapsing ever since. And Joe Kent's resignation was the moment the collapse became irreversible. Because now it is not just Democrats saying the war was a mistake. It is not just anti-war activists or media pundits. It is Trump's own counterterrorism chief. It is someone who was in the room. Someone who saw the intelligence. Someone who has no political axe to grind other than the truth. And his truth is devastating. Now let me add another layer to this disaster, because the Iran war is not happening in isolation. It is happening at the same time as the Epstein files are coming out. It is happening at the same time as Trump is fighting with judges who keep blocking his policies. It is happening at the same time as his own vice president is expressing doubts about the direction of the administration. You have a compound effect, multiple crises hitting at once, and Trump cannot deal with all of them. He does not have the political capital, he does not have the staff, he does not have the focus, and the strain is showing in ways that are becoming impossible to ignore. The viral videos from recent weeks show a president in a state that is difficult to describe as anything other than a psychological breakdown. These are not edited clips taken out of context. These are raw, recorded moments where Trump is visibly angry, visibly scared, visibly losing control. He is ranting on social media at all hours. He is attacking his own party members, calling them disloyal, threatening them with political destruction. He is demanding loyalty to a level that suggests he knows something very bad is coming, and he wants to make sure nobody talks about it or testifies about it or cooperates with the investigations that are surely on the horizon. And every time one of these posts or recordings goes out, it makes things worse for him. Because people see a president who is losing his grip on reality. They see someone who is so focused on loyalty and so focused on protecting himself that he cannot actually govern anymore. They see a man who is breaking down psychologically under the pressure of the moment. The judicial smackdowns have also been huge in terms of breaking his credibility. The courts have been systematically blocking his policies. The Supreme Court took away his immunity claims, a massive legal defeat that undercuts one of his primary defenses against prosecution. And every time a court rules against him, it reinforces the idea that even the judges do not think he is above the law. Even judges he appointed are ruling against him in many cases. That is devastating to his narrative of being a strong leader who is being persecuted by a hostile system. It turns out the system is actually working to hold him accountable. And then you have the Epstein files sitting there in the background. Millions of documents showing his connections to Jeffrey Epstein, flight logs, communications, evidence that has been piling up for years. And every person in his administration knows that when he leaves office, he is probably going to face prosecution for that stuff. So they are all scrambling. They are trying to suppress documents. They are trying to get people to resign so they do not testify later. They are threatening people. And all of that behavior is visible to the American people. It just confirms what they already suspected, which is that Trump is guilty of something, and he is desperate to avoid consequences. So let me paint you the full picture of where we are right now. You have a war that was based on lies, exposed by the president's own counterterrorism chief. You have more than half the country calling for the president to resign immediately. You have an approval rating stuck at the floor, with only the most diehard supporters still holding on. You have a Republican Party that is fracturing in real time, with lawmakers and voters alike starting to ask hard questions about whether this president is worth defending. You have a vice president who is expressing doubts about the direction of the administration. You have courts ruling against the president at every turn. You have Epstein files hanging over everything like a sword waiting to drop. And you have a president who is having a public psychological breakdown on social media for the entire world to see. That is not a presidency in trouble. That is a presidency in its death throes. Let me talk about what happens next, because the immediate future is not going to be pretty for Trump or for the Republican Party. In the short term, Trump is going to continue his social media meltdowns. He cannot help himself. Every attack, every threat, every panicked post just confirms what people already believe about him. But he will keep doing it because he has no other outlet for his rage and his fear. His approval rating is going to continue dropping. More staffers are going to resign. More Republicans are going to break with him publicly. The pressure is going to increase from every direction. The courts, Congress, his own party, the American people. And that pressure is going to break him. It is going to force some kind of resolution, whether he wants it or not. In the medium term, we are looking at impeachment in the House. Once the midterm elections shift the balance of power, and they will shift given how badly Trump is dragging down his own party, the Democratic majority is going to move quickly. The Epstein files will be used as evidence. The Iran war casualties will be used as evidence. Joe Kent will testify. Other staffers will testify. The public record of corruption and lies and abuse of power will be laid out for everyone to see. And then comes the Senate trial. And this is where things get really interesting, because by the time that trial happens, enough Republicans will have abandoned Trump that his defense will collapse. They will not be able to hold the line. They will not be able to muster the votes to acquit. He will be convicted. He will be removed from office. In the long term, we are looking at criminal prosecution, federal prosecution for any number of offenses, state prosecution in New York for the financial crimes that have already been documented, and potentially international prosecution for war crimes related to the Iran conflict. All of that is coming. All of that is waiting on the other side of his presidency. And Trump knows it. He knows that when he leaves office, when he loses the protections of the presidency, he faces serious legal jeopardy. He faces the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. That is why he is panicking. That is why he is trying to suppress the Epstein files. That is why he is threatening his own people. That is why the desperation in those phone calls is so obvious. He is fighting for his freedom. He is fighting for his future. And he is losing. The 55% of Americans calling for his resignation is the ultimate verdict. The American people have made their judgment. They have looked at this president. They have seen what he is doing. They have seen the war he started based on lies. They have seen the chaos. They have seen the psychological breakdown. They have heard his own counterterrorism chief explain that the whole thing was a sham, and they have decided that he should go. That judgment is final. That verdict is delivered. And there is no amount of truth, social posts, or threats to his own party that is going to change it. The only question now is when he leaves and what he leaves behind. Will he resign to save what is left of his dignity? Will he be impeached and removed in a humiliating public spectacle? Will he try to hang on until the end of his term, dragging his party down with him? I do not know the answer to that yet. But I know this much. The end is coming. It is coming faster than most people realize. And the next few months are going to define not just the fate of Donald Trump, but the fate of the Republican Party and perhaps the future of American democracy itself. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. In fact, the real chaos is probably just beginning.